Clicked it. All right. Yep. Looks like it's doing.
Okay.
Cool.
So if I share a screen, if that's okay, do you mind?
Yep. Sure.
See if it works. And so, like, this is our list of questions.
Yes.
Okay. And so we can jump back to the intro, which I have right here. You know, sometimes we might just be really dumb and just read out straight off the page. You know, at times. And then work on our glossary. And who knows how far we'll even get with this. All right.
Yep. Sounds good.
Okay. All right. So this term, I don't know, maybe this is a dumb question, but the cosmic theology comes up a lot. It's in the title of this book, and it's I think it may be in some of the other big books like Thornburg. Like I have Thornburg's book over here, which I haven't really read, to be honest with you, and von Balthasar's book. You know.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah. So like Thornburg's book is called Microcosm. It's got cosm there, and then von Balthasar's book is called Cosmic Liturgy.
Yeah.
So I mean, maybe it's an obvious question, but do you have anything that could be illuminating? I don't know if I do to say about this, how it's cosmic.
So yeah, I think the description, it as a descriptor when talking about Maximian thought, to me at least, refers to the ultimate grandioseness of what he is doing. Like there is, or grandiosity of what he is trying to do. There is, he's not just talking about, you know, the sort of a Protestant soteriology that occurs within the universe. Rather, he's describing the cosmos, all that is and might be. It's a description of the totality of that which is actual and potential, and the way that the narrative that we find in especially in the account of the incarnation of Christ and the redemption of creation fits into that, and not just fits into that, describes ultimately everything, and the idea of all of creation, both the seen and the unseen, you know, that idea of cosmic liturgy, there's nothing that does not partake in the grand thing, and it's the grand thing that he's talking about, particularly when when it comes to, you're talking about the logos and the logoi, and then the idea of the logos being incarnated and descending down through the ontological hierarchy to redeem the fallenness of it all. Like there's this very much a cosmic quality to everything that, you know, what little I've read of it so far. There's a cosmic quality to it that simply saying he's talking about this thing or that thing doesn't do it justice. That's at least kind of what I get out of it.
Yeah. So the incarnation, I know it's a big topic, but like, so so Christ, we look at the incarnation, we study all of his life, right? And we attune ourselves to the scriptures and this life, and we become part of like the redemption of like the cosmos.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah. Right.
I think so. I think there's a part that we play in it.
Uh-huh. Yeah, I'm always wondering about kind of green consciousness and deep ecology. Not that I know much about these things, but how it speaks to, and how it might be sort of like an apologetic way to reach, you know, build bridges between kind of religious and non-religious people, because, you know, green consciousness people tend to be sort of pagan and anti-Christian, and I just wonder if there's a bridge to be found here to build, you know.
Certainly, possibly, at least within the, you know, the permaculture movement as a, we'll call it a something of a philosophical movement. It places the human person within the system, right? And so and I'm definitely not a permaculture expert, and I don't even know very much about it, but it seems to me, from what little I do know, that that as a philosophy of interacting with the earth below, and us above, so to speak, ontologically anyway, how it posits the human into the system, and it's aware of, or at least it tries to be aware of the proper relationships between, say, the animals and the plants, and the canopy plants with the ground cover plants, and how it tries to deliberately facilitate a symbiotic relationship between the different layers within the permaculture garden or place, but the human that tends it is a part of that system. I think there's a tendency, particularly within modernity, to perceive us. I think this is part of what I would call the cosmic misalignment. But it takes everything that is higher than man and pushes it aside. And when you do that, then man sits at the top of the hierarchy, and everything else below, like, we interact with it as though we are gods. We shape the earth, we shape nature to our own will. And I think there's a bit of a difference, particularly with the permaculture philosophy there, that is perhaps more in line with I suppose, the proper way that the cosmos itself was intended to be aligned.
Right.
That may have been a little rambly, but
No, it's fine. Just get your thoughts out. Maverick, are you with us now?
This is a oh, sorry, go ahead. I
No,
just wanted to say this area of particular interest for me, the connection between this kind of theology and green ecology.
Mhm.
I recently read a thesis that was about deep ecology, right? And sort of establishing, in that case, connections between. So, I mean, deep ecology, right, is a movement associated with a Norwegian philosopher called Arne Næss, right?
Okay.
And his so a lot of what we think of as, like, there are different perspectives on it, where what he would see as a shallow ecology is an ecology that it's just kind of like, well, we're going to do little things to ameliorate the situation on the surface, right? And we're going to, within, right, a structure that's basically doesn't treat nature, the planet, the ecology as more than a means to human happiness, right? Like, it's exclusively for our use. It's like kind of the modernist instrumentalization of nature, right? As just something that, yeah, I mean, people like Heidegger talk about this, right? Like, where it's kind of this tyranny of technology, and sort of we're no longer capable of tapping into the sense of wonder and the disclosure of being, right, through God's creation, right, if you wanted to put it in theological terms. Now, Ness, right, has his own thing, right? He never said that people need to. I mean, some people, unfortunately, do follow his way of seeing things dogmatically, right? Which, I mean, his own inspiration was people more like Spinoza, right? Which is extremely interesting and has ties in with German idealist philosophy and that sort of thing. But from an Eastern Orthodox perspective specifically, okay, there's this great book called The Noetics of Nature by Bruce Fultz. And this is like the most serious attempt I've seen of articulate right what a sort of I mean, he from an Eastern Orthodox theological perspective, how you could articulate a deep ecology, right? And you have to, like, get into, right, like, what is it that makes it deep, right? Like, it's not, as you say, right? I think it's not that you flatten the hierarchy, right? It's not that you say man is just an animal, animal is just the same as life, or like plant life, or it's
Sure, yeah,
all just flat, right?
right.
It's not what it is. It's more that if and now I can't claim to speak authoritatively. I mean, obviously, I would just say people should really, read this book, and then some of the other associated studies, right, that he's or conferences he's been involved in, and it's really fascinating. But as I understand it, it's more that as God's stewards, right, we embrace
Sure.
that role, right? We the same way that it, in Christ, right, all things are redeemed and brought to fulfillment. Same way, we it's very closely related to sophiology. If just to get, that would be the short way to say it. That this idea of kind of the entire world and universe as icon, right? Right, and as theophany. This is the long and short of it. But obviously, it's much more intricately defended and sort of presented, and kind of uh, why you can see this developing organically out of Orthodox theology, which is held to have, and I think it's true, to have a very different take on things that avoid some of the pitfalls of, modernist. I don't say scholastic or early medieval necessarily, but modernist Western theology, which led to, the whole associated with ontotheology and these kinds of things. That kind of has been very hostile to, and sort of, seen nature as something evil or to be exploited, or, contrary to God, right? I mean, it gets back again, right, to the whole nature supernature divide, right? And if
Mhm.
you're going to be really sharp about that, or you're going to view it as a continuum, that's really key to the whole thing. So he also, which I think is really important, it's not just like, like anti-Western or something either, right? It's not just like, the East is right, the West is just wrong. He built bridges.
Ness. Okay, you're talking to Ness's thought.
No,
Okay.
sorry, that was all Bruce Foltz.
Okay.
Ness is a little different, but
Okay.
Ness is a little closer to flattening things out, and he has less of a sense of hierarchy. But Foltz, see. I was gonna I don't want to go on too long about that because it's kind of a side thing, but unless you want to talk, but he built bridges to Western philosophy and also to Western theology, through figures like John Scotus Eriugena, right, and kind of a certain strain of Irish theology. He's not the only one who's built that bridge, which really is in many ways very close to an Eastern way of seeing these things, and because of Maximus specifically, right, who Eriugena took up along with Dennis the Areopagite, and kind of synthesized with the Augustinian framework, right, to give it an infusion of something much more like what we're discussing here.
Mm. Okay, I just have a thought. I just want to get it out. Um, there's this. Is the word like anthropomorphic, or I don't even. I don't quite have the right word. But this issue of in ethics, the issue will often come up of where we place the human. Is the human sort of at the top of the hierarchy and enacting God's will, whereas some kind of, I hate to use the word, but left political spectrum people, and who might be, consider themselves environmentalists, they sort of have this kind of anti-human, like humans are a wretch. Humans are wrecking the universe. Trash them, get rid of them, and if they die, fine. Whereas the Christian kind of anthropology is definitely not that. Does Maximus help us find a way through that divide at all? You got any thoughts on that?
I mean, I think right, in one sense, right, we're in the middle, right? We're not angels, we're not demons,
Mm.
right? We have the animal in us, we have the angelic in us, right? We have the demonic in us, right? But see, so in a sense, so within the hierarchy, we're middling, but the great thing that God, I mean, through why is it that through Adam all fall, and so through Christ the second Adam all are, it, it, that all is the universe, right? I even found one, what was it, the fellow who put together the Philokalia
Mm-hmm.
made a very radical interpretation of this kind of theology, where he said, okay, a lot of people say man is the microcosm, he's like this extract of the universe, right? He said, no. The fathers teach us that man is the macrocosm and the universe is the microcosm. And I'm like, I still don't know what that means exactly. But there's some way in which it's all in us. So that's why our salvation matters for the whole universe, right? If mankind is saved through Christ, then everything is deified, everything is divinized, right?
I think it might have something to do with talking about where man is within this hierarchy of being. Describing us as in the middle, I think that's probably the most useful way to think of it. There's always something above and there's always something below. And to that extent, we reside in Midan Yard. We reside in Middle Earth. The idea that man, the pre-sundered Adam, if you will, is given dominion over creation. He names the animals, and there's this various language that's used in the Genesis account to suggest that all of the physical earthly creation, at the very least, is placed underneath Adam. And so the fall then of man, like everything that is underneath or contained within Adam, subsequently falls as well. The idea of death and sin entering the world at the fall of man. There's other stuff that goes on at higher ontological levels than we, with the angelic rebellions and things that occur at, to describe them as occurring at a particular point in time, I think is rather meaningless. But they occur, and there's a point at which we begin to participate in these rebellions, so to speak. Again, this cosmic misalignment. But the idea that the Logos incarnates as a man, the new Adam, and so whereas all creation falls with the fall of the first man, of the first Adam, so all creation is redeemed by the ascent, by the resurrection of the second Adam. It is in a lot of the iconography, we see the crucifixion of Christ upon Golgotha, and we get a glimpse into the hill, and the cross stands upon the skull of Adam. And the second Adam also dies, but he's not conquered by death, and we have this redemptive route, not just for man, but for all that man was given dominion of,
Mm-hmm.
which is all the creation that we're given stewardship of.
Right. Well, if you're an environmentalist and you're whatever, Greta Thunberg or something, I don't know much about her at all, but just the name popped up. And if you're saying we should change policies or go in some area, or put our directives, put our energy somewhere. I mean, that's a human-centered. Humans are doing it, right? And so humans have to be at the forefront, at least at some point, so like that's a recognition, seemingly to some extent, of this, what you just said, like the fall happening to all creation, but in Adam, and man at the same time. And man has to be held maybe even slightly above the middle, but okay, say middle, right? So we have to be on the same page at some point with environmentalists, right? In terms
Yeah,
of how high we place human directive, right?
I think it's a very important. It's there as a subtext, but I think often kind of people who are not religious, right, who don't have some kind of philosophical uh, way in, they won't. It'll be there as a subtext, but they won't necessarily be conscious of it, right? Uh, you find it even, and so, and this is actually an example of a conscious case of it, to be honest with you. I'm quite sure he intended this, but William Shakespeare, believe it or not, I was really struck when I read Macbeth, for example, right? And you see it in other plays. When there's a just king, it's reflected in nature, right? When there's an unjust king, you see perturbations in nature. Like in Macbeth, they report when Macbeth is on the throne, birds fly backwards, and just strange prodigies in nature where things are going haywire. And if you want, I mean, you can interpret COVID as exactly something like that. That we're not right with our nature and with our Creator. So of course things are are going in the environment. But yeah, when you get to a policy level, I mean, we should take that very seriously, that we have that role to play, that it's like we need to step into that role by just realizing, not only on an instrumental level, right, on a purely physical material level, but I mean, we don't use that. Why do we? Hmm?
On an ontological level, even, right?
Yeah, I mean, why does this, if we're just this piddling, I mean, like if we're inconsequential and accidental, why do we have this bizarre power to destabilize the whole planet, right? I mean, did the dinosaurs have that power, to reshape the very, face of the earth? I mean, I don't think so. So I think there's a way to talk about it, even to people who don't necessarily have extremely firm, theological commitments, if you get a sense of what they're tapping into. Because I mean, I'm sure you guys know, right? I mean, humanism is basically, it's like a piece of Christianity that's been cut out, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So there's a lot to, and even if it tends to look more to Eastern spirituality, right? Or to shamanic, or kind of, like it's seeking. It has some kind of not fully conscious intimation of its roots, which is what you see. That's why. So, like in the thesis I read, you see a strong connection between this kind of deep ecology, eco-consciousness. Go back to the transcendentalists, right? It's just a straightforwardly kind of, well, not straightforward. They're in that ambiguous space, like, are they secular, or are these like very religious people? It's like they're right in that kind of, it's where it's being formed, like that. And there's a lot. I would obviously I would take kind of something that you find in the transcendentalist attitude to nature, more Emerson than Thoreau, just from my perspective, but tie it with sacramentality instead of making it, its own thing that has no connection to a sacramental worldview. And I think that's what people like Foltz do, in much more exacting philosophical rigor than I can do.
I'll have to look for that book. The ecumenical patriarch is very green. I don't know what he says. I really should check into it. Have you followed any tenets of his thought much? Do you know like specifics that he's putting forward?
I don't know enough about that. I know that Bruce Foltz is involved in that initiative, as is I think John Chrysovgus, and so one of the collections of essays I'm thinking of, which I don't have yet, is definitely under the auspices of the patriarch. So that's to me, no, that's really important. That's some of the more serious theological work on the environment that's been done. I mean, by anyone, Christian or otherwise. I mean, you have something very like it in the Roman Catholic tradition with Franciscan theology, right? That's their version of that.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, that's a whole. There are a lot of similarities there, and a lot of obviously some differences in how they do that.
Mm-hmm. All right, really interesting stuff here. I don't think there are tangents really. I don't care how slow we go through this stuff. But so I was saying, I don't know if you were here when I said this, but one thing would be kind of interesting to do, I think, is to make a word list. I could have a glossary. Were you here when I said that? And we could start doing it now or later. But I don't know if you've ever done this, but I like for my PhD, I at some point had to just pull out like the theoretical terms that I kept using over and over. And when I started to put them into a list and give a definition, it really was a good exercise. If no one got anything out of it other than me, but when these terms come up, in Maximus, because these guys who are these scholars, they'll give us the term. So if they do come up, I think for us to maybe together, or even myself, or anybody, to get a word list and get it in, check a Greek dictionary, make sure you're putting it in the right place, and get some things on there. You know what I mean? Like I don't know, even as an exercise. So this is like the very beginning of the so I'm sharing a screen, I think you guys, right? So you can see what I'm showing. Is there anything can I cut and paste? Telos, right? I mean, that's probably a word most people know.
Sure.
But if I were to stick that on there, will this be embarrassing? Okay, so I can get this quickly in Greek.
This is going on YouTube time.
Yeah, I just put it in YouTube. Okay, I've got that. So, how would you? Maybe that's not a good one to start with, but so get some terms on here that help us think. Maybe telos isn't a good one to do, but yeah, there it shows up. But to get a word list going, some of it will be obvious and boring at the beginning.
Are you sharing something right now? I cannot see it.
Oh, you don't see it. Let me try this again. Somehow that got cut off. I don't know where it got cut off. But so, yeah. So I'm sticking things on on a doc there.
Gotcha.
So how would you, in terms of Maximus's thought, how would you define that?
Well, based on what little of Maximus I have read so far, that seems to be, his description of the end state in which we find rest. In the introduction, and this gets into a little bit of Ambiguum 7,
right?
Where he takes the and I haven't read. I have Origin here, his De Principiis, but I haven't read. But anyway, the idea of genesis, kinesis, and stasis that we see in Maximus is really a switching around of something that was found in Origin, and that in the beginning of Ambiguum 7 he is commenting on through, I think, one of the orations of Saint Gregory Nazianzus.
Mm-hmm.
So the idea that and this gets into the whole pre-existence of souls thing, which was a little controversial, but the idea that the soul of, I guess it's the soul of the I don't know, I haven't read enough to know if it's talking about the soul of the individual or what exactly is meant here, but was at rest, was at stasis, and then because of choros, of satiety, it moved in order to experience something other than the rest that it was experiencing in God, and this was a slipping down into the, we'll call it the I don't know if you want to call it the carnal existence, but anyway, so this is the origin sort of scheme. Maximus comes and in Ambiguum 7 flips that around a bit and says that rather we have our coming into being, our genesis in God, and we then move towards Him, and but it's because God is eternal, because God is infinite, we never quite reach that. We're seeking rest within the bosom of our Father, as it were. So St. Paul talks at the Areopagus in Athens when he's speaking to the philosophers in the shadow of the Parthenon. He's quoting their own philosophers. He says, "For in him we live and move and have our being, as your own poets have said, we are his offspring." So Maximus seems to be kind of going off with this same idea that in him we live and move and have our being. We are the offspring of God, because we've been created by God, but we've been created, our coming into being was with we'll say an appetite towards that which created us, and so the movement is towards this, and only when attaining that which we seek could we find rest. And this is the telos of it all. This is the telos of man. The end state is what we're looking for, where we find stasis in God, and this is, the rest occurs when we have reached the destination. Because God is eternal, it's not as simply straightforward as a chronological or as a temporal movement from point A to point B. It's a little more complex than that, because I think the temporal experience that we go through is part of the fall, would be my uneducated theory about that. But the
temporal experience we go through. I mean, as in the human life, or what? The whole cosmos, or what?
Yeah, well, the chain of causality that we experience in our day-to-day existence. The idea that I do this, then this happens, and then I do that. So I think within, and this might be getting a little off track here, but I think there's something to be said for the idea of eternality when it comes to, number one, God, and number two, the eschaton. So when we speak of that which is eschatological, we're normally talking about the final things, right? The end times, as well, the day of judgment and all that stuff. But I think there's a way in which the end is exactly the beginning, right? The end resembles the beginning because it is a new beginning. That I think it's Lewis. I think it's in. It might be in The Great Divorce, as he's musing and speculating about the afterlife, despite saying that he doesn't want to do that in the introduction. He says there's a point where we realize that we have always been in heaven, or we have always been in hell. We, in this temporal experience of fallen carnal life, experience this chain of causality. Jung wrote, and far be it from me to invoke Jung, but Jung wrote a short text called On Synchronicity, which he called the a-causal connecting principle, in which he asserts that because of meaning and man's ability to apprehend and or intuit meaning, we're able to make connections between things that don't have any direct causal mechanistic connection. So we might see an omen and it changes, like we might take that, or the birds flying and overhead, take that as an omen to then do the thing, and then things turn out the way we expected them to. Anyway, so this is what he's describing as synchronicity, this acausal connecting principle. And it's a bit counterintuitive because we see everything as causally and mechanistically connected. But so in the liturgy, if we go up and we partake of the Eucharist, we partake of the body and blood of Christ, there's this idea that it's not that we are, we're not merely reenacting a thing. We're not merely doing it in memory of, though it is in memory of. But there's something eternal occurring there. The same cup from which we sip is the same cup that Christ poured out at the last summer. It's the same cup that was shared in liturgies and Hagia Sophia. It's the same cup that is shared across all Orthodox churches everywhere in the world, this Sunday and every Sunday, because it is in this thing that all things coalesce. So there's an eternality present in this symbolic thing that transcends the temporal, causal, mechanistic experience of reality that we generally, we'll say, wrestle with in our day-to-day. And I think God and our experience of God is optimally that kind of a thing, where we step out of the whirling circle, as it were, and is it Paul that says, now we see through a glass darkly, but then we shall see him face to face, for we shall see him as he is. This idea of divinization, where we become caught up in the divinity ourselves, participating in the divine nature. Like it's very difficult, in my opinion, to analyze these things in a merely mechanistic, causal way. There's something occurring that requires that we step out of, again, the whirling circle, which is a Jungian phrase. And yeah, anyway, that's a bit of a ramble, but I wasn't even looking at what you were typing there, Todd.
Explore your thought. See, what'll happen? Go ahead.
Oh, I have just a couple of thoughts and a question. I mean, the question. So telos, I think of as the end of creation, which in some way, fun, but of course, it's not just going back to the beginning, but in a new way. What would be the corresponding word in Greek to refer to the origin point, corresponding to telos for the end point?
It's come up a couple times. Genos, right, or something like that.
So that's the coming into being, as Maximus uses it. There's the word arche, which is like in the gospel, in the prologue to John's gospel, in arche logos keo logos, which is in the beginning, in the first thing. So if if there's probably going to be some Greek scholar watching this video and saying, oh, he's wrong, and I'm probably wrong, but yeah, that's the way I understand it, at least. The eschaton is the final things. Arche speaks of the beginning of the first things. Genesis has to do with seems to be related meaningfully to that idea, but seems to be the coming into being of, at least with what little I've read of Maximus, it seems to be referring specifically to the coming into being of the human soul or person.
Yeah, we're sort of moving back here between like things that happen in the cosmos itself and within the individual person. So, this might seem like this fruitless exercise. How do you, these really deep terms, how do you define them? And we're not really trying to get anything exhaustive up here in terms of these things, but I think it might be a useful exercise. It might be fun. I don't know, to give me feedback if it's terrible, but does this look okay, what I wrote here? And I'm wondering how to get cosmos in there too, because in which we find rest, or is the cosmos also, because we started off a long discussion of the cosmos and cosmic things. Um, are we? Is this sort of? Are they sort of happening in tandem? This movement to human rest in the human trajectory, and also the cosmic movement in the cosmic trajectory as well.
I suspect so. So there is, and well, so this is actually another way, I think, in which we were talking about creation and man's dominion over creation, the redemption of man being the redemption of that which man had under his dominion, which fell when man fell, right? So there's that, and then there's also seems to be, just because I think you made me think about we'll call it a difference in scale here is the main thing, but the idea of the salvation of the individual, or the life of the individual, and the life of the church, and I think ultimately the idea that at least the Orthodox have of the church is, while there's a degree to which it's an exclusive term for Eastern Orthodox Christians. I think from in a more cosmic sense, I guess, what the Orthodox perceive the church to be is what they perceive all of mankind to be in concert, in symphony. This imago, the imago Dei, the image of God, the icon of God that was made and took its form in Adam and was split into Adam and Eve. That this is the ultimate expression of man. This is the ultimate expression of, we'll say, the redeemed Adam. So the idea of this, this movement towards stasis happening in tandem, I think, obviously, as man moves towards God, all that is within man or under the dominion of man moves towards God as well. But this isn't so. To an extent, this happens within the life of the individual. And that's true. There's a degree to which the man is a microcosm of man, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I think I don't know if that makes any sense.
The man is Christ, right? The Son of Man, right?
Sorry, say that again.
When you say the man, you're talking about Christ, right? The Son of Man.
Not specifically. I'm talking about just the man, like you or I or the person on the street. The man. Okay. So the man must wrestle out salvation daily, right? But then there's the extent to which mankind itself also does this. Mankind, like, we think in terms of the individual all the time. And I think there's a place in which our perspective ought to shift between looking at only ourselves as an individual, but realizing that the individual has no meaning. Like, I have no meaning outside of other people. Like, there's a greater ontological body reality of which I am a constituent part. And the redemption of man, while it includes the redemption of one man, its meaning and significance is not exhausted in the salvation of Bob. Rather, there's a much grander sense in which that's true. Not that the lower microcosmic sense is false. It is true, but it's not the whole truth. But this kind of gets, I guess, touches at that idea of I think the redemptive motion occurs at multiple levels simultaneously. So yes, in tandem. Yeah, it was a long way to say, yeah, I think so.
One thing I just want to come back to, right, is the way that our perception of our fallenness plays into our regeneration and seeking our source, right?
Yeah.
Because I saw a very interesting way of framing it, right? That there's one sense of passionate love as nostalgia, right? It's that feeling of this ache, right? This kind of this or this desire, right? We often think of there's passions or desires are often thought of as something problematic, right? In sort of monastic theology, but they're also but they're neutral because that's also what attunes us to the divine eros, right?
Right.
To the divine outpouring, really almost a divine ecstasy, right? That is the impulse that brings forth creation. And so, as you say, right, the Christian message is that this is specific to the church and its sacraments. But we should be clear, I think, that the ache is universal, right?
Yes.
Um,
Yeah. Certainly.
yeah, like I think, and what astonishes me sometimes is just how much you find it in what we think of as Western secular culture, right? So, have you ever read Wordsworth's Ode on Intimations of Immortality?
Many, many years ago as an
Oh,
undergraduate.
yes.
Possible. I think I did. I think I actually read it aloud recently.
Right.
It was a particularly noteworthy Wordsworth poem. I don't recall the title, but I think that was it.
There are so many bits of it, right? Because I would say the most famous, right, is this bit. I mean, if you ever have time, just sit with it and contemplate the different pieces of it. But it's about so many. There's so many layers. But he says, "Our birth is but a sleep and a forgetting. The soul that rises with us, right? Our life's star hath had elsewhere its setting, and cometh from afar. Not in entire forgetfulness, and not in utter nakedness, but trailing clouds of glory do we come
Yeah.
from God who is our home." And there's a descent where heaven lies about us in our infancy, but then tumbles down through each stage of life, and kind of this pure light, this sense of childlike innocence and wonder it becomes buried,
Yeah.
right? I find, but so he has like a hint of it, but he really withholds the sense that he's ever really going to find, right, the redemption that he longs for, that is kind of just embedded in his being. And he's definitely, he doesn't want to resolve the tension. I think he wants to bring it out in people without kind of fixing what's broken, because that brokenness, you need to feel into the brokenness to come to wholeness. But
Yeah.
he drops a hint where he says, hence in a season of calm weather, though inland far we be, our souls have sight of that immortal sea which brought us hither, can in a moment travel thither, and see the children sport upon the shore, and hear the mighty waters rolling evermore. So I would be fascinated. You could trace this straight back, I think, to the fathers, if somebody wanted to do that.
Can I share a poem? Another, because I love poetry too,
Yeah.
and it's on your theme actually. So in order to not show all my stuff and my messages and stuff, I'm going to stop sharing for 1 second, and I'm going to jump over because I want to read this out of. I want to read the whole thing. So, and I have to go in just a minute actually. So there's a poem called "Kindness" by. Have you guys heard of this? Really famous poem. I think she won some award for this thing. she's a really well-known poet and has lots of positions like National Endowment for the Arts and stuff. Naomi Shihab Nye is her name. And I sent this to a friend the other day, and I'm going to go into this message. Okay, here it is. Okay, so can I get this any bigger? Oh, it's not really big enough. I tell you what.
But it's very interesting, this question of like time and simultaneity, right?
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to. I'm not going to go on about this, but I just wanted to because I remember we mentioned causality, right?
Correct.
And there's a way in, like in comment, in our usual way of thinking, right? It's like this leads to this leads to this, right? It's like efficient causality,
Sure.
or maybe material causality. And as you know, right, we kind of lost the other two Aristotelian causes, but somebody put it this way, and tell me, I want to hear what you guys, if you think this is right, that causality isn't about sequence. It's about, in that sense, it's not. It's about relations of dependence, right? It's not this in a chain. This bumps into this, and this. It's this is contingent upon this, is contingent upon this, right? And does that seem right to you?
But ultimately, that all hinges upon what precisely you mean by the word contingent. The particular thing. So, I think this actually what I'm about to say ties into Maximus a bit. So last time we did this, I think who was it? Was it Todd? I think you quoted Tao Te Ching or something from Lao Tzu.
Yeah.
But and I think I had to go. But there was brewing in my mind there and I think this is the my at least answer to your question or proposition, Brian. There's a section in the Tao Te Ching. I don't know which translation it is, but Lao Tzu or the Lao Tzus say there is a thing inherent and natural which existed before heaven and earth, motionless and fathomless. It stands alone and never changes. It pervades everywhere and never becomes exhausted. It may be regarded as the mother of the universe. I do not know its name. I call it Tao, and I name it as supreme. So. Tao often gets left untranslated in English versions. Carl Jung had a friend who's a German sinologist who translated various works, but he translated the Tao Te Ching, and he chose to translate that word Tao as meaning.
Okay.
And there's. I think that is, and this is sort of what Jung asserts when talking about synchronicity, the a-causal connecting principle. But the things are contingent upon other things to the extent that meaning is derived from something above. We can say ontologically. So like in that sense, there's contingency. A break in that chain means that the fount from, because meaning emanates from above, and we'll say that the ordering of chaos, or the ordering of potentiality into actuality. So that emanates from above. We'll say from God, through angels, through man, whatever, from man lower down into plants and animals, into the earth itself, as we smash atoms, into the subatomic level, all this stuff, right? So like meaning, the ordering of this chaotic potentiality, the dirt, comes from above. This idea of dust you are, and to dust you shall return. Man's made from the dust. So God forms man out of the dust of the ground. He raises man up. So the creative act is always this raising matter and lowering meaning, breathing the spirit, the breath of life into the nostrils of Adam. So like this is how things always work at every level of the hierarchy. And when we step outside of what I sort of describe as the mechanistic causality, so the contingency that I see is that idea of meaning. Meaning always comes from above. The moment we start to try to find meaning from below, things get inverted, things go awry, and that's an improper ordering of things. But anyway, sort of rambly, but anyway, those are my thoughts. Yes.
No, it's really interesting, and I hate to cut you off, and I do mean that. I'm not hyperbole. But I got to go in a few minutes. It's really interesting. Can I share one poem and it fits into what we're saying?
Please. Yes, please do.
So am I sharing my screen now?
Yes.
Okay, so this is this really cool poem by Naomi Shihab Nye, okay? It's called Kindness. Before you know what kindness really is, you must lose things. Feel the future dissolve in a moment like salt in a weakened broth. What you held in your hand, what you counted and carefully saved, all this must go, so you know how desolate the landscape can be between the regions of kindness, how you ride and ride, thinking the bus will never stop. The passengers, eating maize and chicken, will stare out the window forever. Before you learn the tender gravity of kindness, you must travel where the Indian in a white poncho lies dead by the side of the road. You must see how this could be you, how he too was someone who journeyed through the night with plans and the simple breath that kept him alive. Before you know kindness as the deepest thing inside, you must know sorrow as the other deepest thing. You must wake up with sorrow. You must speak to it till your voice catches the thread of all sorrows, and you see the size of the cloth. Then it is only kindness that makes sense anymore, only kindness that ties your shoes and sends you out into the day to gaze at bread, only kindness that raises its head from the crowd of the world to say, it is I you have been looking for, and then goes with you everywhere like a shadow or a friend. So this got this pathos. It's much more beyond us, right? We're not saving ourselves. And we in this loss, in this pathos, and getting it. So like the passions are not just bad, like sorrow and fear and resentment and anger are the bad things, but they also bring us in touch, right? And so she puts in these little things about she's riding on a bus and she's probably in Mexico or Latin America somewhere, sees this guy, maybe she's down Machu Picchu or something, Argentina, and seeing this guy in a poncho, and he's the guy who's died, and it all ties together in this loss, So, maybe there's some Maximus connection here. So, but see, guys, I really got to go. There's someone waiting on me. Do you think it would be cool, like if I put this glossary on a Google Doc and we can kind of just add to it?
That would be great.
Yeah. We can just keep on.
Yes.
Go ahead.
Yeah. One thing we should all do, I think, in order to, ground the discussion, right? If we talk about the cosmos, right? But I would suggest that we each do a little bit of reading to brush up on our pre-modern cosmology, particularly right in the kind of Platonic, Aristotelian, and patristic tradition, right? To kind of get a sense of that, because they've got their cosmology of the spheres and the Empyrean, all that. So if we could just read a little bit I think that would really help us to grasp what we're going to delve into in the book.
I like it. Okay, so if we can kind of try to meet every 2 weeks, maybe like on this around this time. So that not next week, but the week after, and do we want to continue with these questions and get through the introduction at some point and throw in a bit of cosmological history study as well?
It's fine with me.
Yeah,
sure. I like talking about all that stuff.
Okay, cool. All right, so we've recorded and we'll post that up there on the group so people can see it. I got somebody waiting a minute. I really have to go.
All right, later, Todd.
All right, guys. Cheers. Thanks a lot.
All right, still there, Brian?
I am. Are you? So, where are you at? Where are you at, by the way?
Hang on just a second. I'm going to.